Welcome back to Educator.com's Introduction to PHP course. In today's lesson, we're going to be introducing the topic of conditional loops. Specifically, we're going to be introducing the most fundamental conditional looping structure, which is known as the while loop. We're going to talk about looping over arrays, which is basically going over the elements in an array and performing certain actions on them. And this is an extremely common task that you'll use throughout all of your PHP code. We're going to talk about some functions used in looping over arrays, which are array traversal functions. We're going to talk about the topic of control structure scope, which is another discussion of variable scope, and we're going to go over some coding conventions as they apply to while loops. So a while loop is essentially a conditional control structure. It's kind of like an if statement or an else statement. And what it is it has a statement group, or a group of statements that get executed when a certain condition is met. Unlike the if statement, though, or the switch statement, it allows the statements within its statement group to be executed repeatedly. So basically what happens is, for example, here's what a while loop looks like. It has the while keyword. It looks very similar to an if statement, and it has a test condition. And what it does is it executes the statements within its statement group if the test condition evaluates to true. And it's the same type of test condition you can use for an if statement or an else if statement. The difference is that instead of an if statement, once the statement group is executed, it doesn't move down to the next line of code. It actually goes back to the top and reevaluates the test condition. If the test condition is still true, it goes ahead and it executes its statement group all over again. And it does that repeatedly until the test condition equals true. The key thing to note is that before it executes the statement group is when it evaluates the test condition, and before re-entering that statement group, it re-evaluates the test condition on each sort of, it's called loop of the function, excuse me, of the structure. While loops typically use what's known as a counter or a Boolean flag that gets altered within the loop statement group in order to end the execution of the loop. Clean this up. So because this loop gets executed repeatedly until the test condition returns false, you need to have some way of making that test condition false. And the way you do that is by altering some variable or test condition or some variable within your statement group so that test condition will actually equal false, and then the loop will stop. Otherwise you get stuck in what's known as an infinite loop, which we're going to be talking about in another lesson. Now, one thing to note also is that like an if statement, the statement group of a while control structure only gets executed while the test condition is true. So if we actually had a while statement where we set the test condition equal to the literal value false, then just as an if statement, if we had done the same thing, the statement group, whatever statements are within that while statement group, are never going to be executed. So let's go take a look at a script called while.php. And the first thing we're going to introduce is what's known as a loop counter. And basically a loop counter is something that you can use to know when to end the execution of the loop. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically create a loop that's going to output the numbers 1 through 5. And what it's going to do is each time the loop goes through, it's going to increment a variable, a counter variable, by 1, and then the next time that loop goes through, it tests to see whether that counter variable is less than or equal to 5, and if so, it continues to output until the incrementing of the variable makes the test condition false. So let's take a look at what that actually looks like. It's a little easier to see in action. So we're going to define a loop counter variable, and the most common loop counter variable that you'll see on all sorts of PHP scripts in all programming actually is it's called I, and we're going to set that equal to 1. So now we've created a variable called I. It's equal to 1. And then in our while statement, we're going to have a test condition that says, as long as I is less than or equal to 5, I want you to keep executing the statements within this while statement group. And what we're going to do within our while statement group is we're going to just simply echo the counter, the variable I. So let me finish typing this. So for example, when this loop first executes, I is going to be equal to 1. It's going to go up to the while. It's going to check the test condition. Is 1 less than or equal to 5? Yes. So it's going to enter the statement group. Here it's going to output I, whose current value is equal to 5. And then the key here is that the next step that we do is we increment the value, and we're going to use the increment operator that we learned about in our lesson on operators. What that's going to do is increment I so that after this first while loop is executed for the first time, at the end I is going to be equal to 1, but then when we increment it, it's equal to 2. It's going to go back up to the top. It's going to say is 2 less than or equal to 5. That's going to evaluate to true. So it's going to enter again. It's going to output 2. It's going to then increment it to 3 and go up to the top. Test is 3 less than or equal to 5. Yes, it's going to output it. It's going to do that each time until after 5, once I is incremented to 5, it'll say 5 is less than or equal to 5, true. It's going to output 5, and then when we increment it, I is going to be equal to 6. So the next time that this while loop is entered, it's going to say is 6 less than or equal to 5. It's going to return false, and then you're going to essentially jump out of the while loop. So let's go ahead and run this code. Take a look at it in our browser. And you can see what it's done is it's output the 5 variables 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now the other thing you can do, for example, is let's say we wanted to output 10 numbers. We could just change the loop, the test condition to 10 so that it executes 10 different times, and then we're going to get the output 1 through 10. Now the other thing that we mentioned was that you can also use what are known as Boolean flags to end a while statement. Here, this while statement, or the while loop, ends anytime that I is less than or equal to 5 if we return it back to its original value. Well, you also can use a while statement that just tests a Boolean variable. And if the Boolean variable is true, it goes ahead and it evaluates the loop. If it's false, it doesn't. So what we're going to do is, before we do this, I want to introduce a function. If we go to PHP.net, there's a function called rand that generates a random integer. And basically what you can do is you can specify, you can supply with 2 arguments, a minimum integer and a maximum integer. And when you call that function, it's going to return a random integer within that range, specified by min and max. So actually what we're going to do is, in our while loop, we're going to be, each time the while loop runs, we're going to be generating a random number, and we're going to be testing to see if the number is over 90. And if the number is over 90, then we want to exit out of the loop. And this is just a test example of something you can do with a while loop, and we're going to use a Boolean flag to do that. So what we're going to do is going to create, actually first let me uncomment this. We're going to create a Boolean flag, and Boolean flags or Boolean variables are often started with the word is, because is it true, is it false, and we're going to call it is over 90, which basically the name implies is over 90 set to true or false. We're going to set it to false initially, and then in our while condition we're going to say we want to continue to generate random numbers until we generate a number that's over 90. The way we do that is we use the not operator on is over 90. So what this is going to do is every time this loop executes, when it comes back up to the top and evaluates a test condition, it's going to perform the not operation on is over 90. So as long as is over 90 is still false, this test condition will evaluate to true, and it'll continue to execute the loop. So initially, because we set is over 90 to false, not false is going to equal true. The loop is going to be entered initially. Now within the function, within the while loop, we're going to generate a random number just called random num, and we're going to generate it a number, random number in the range 1 to 100, and this is using the rand function. And then what we're going to do is output the random number that's generated in each execution of the while loop. Now this loop is going to continue because is over 90 is initially set to false. This loop will continue indefinitely until something acts to change this variable is over 90 to true, which will make the test condition evaluate to false. So what we can do is we can add an if statement that's going to test the value of random num on each execution of the loop. And it's going to test if random num is greater than 90, then we're going to change the value of is over 90 to true, because now it's true. We found a variable that's over, we generated a random number that's over 90. So when this function eventually generates a random number over 90, which it eventually will, that's the nature of a random number generator, is over 90 will be set to true, and then when it goes back up here to evaluate the test condition, it's going to say not true, evaluate to false. It's going to jump out of the while loop. And then just the bottom here, we just after it exits the loop, we're going to say exits the loop. We're going to just output a message that says a number then greater than 90 was generated. So if we go ahead and we run this page again, or run the script again, oops, looks like I had a typo. Let me go ahead and comment out this section up here as well so we don't see that output. Double check things. Seems like we're having a problem here. Make sure I save the page. Oh, there it is. It just took a while to run. So as you can see, when this Boolean flag example ran, in this case it ran through several different numbers before it generated a number equal to 90, greater than 90. As you can see, the last number generated was equal to 98, which is going to set that is over 90 flag equal to true, and then we're going to output a number over 90 was generated. Because of the nature of the random function, this loop's going to run a different amount of times each time the while loop is run. So if we refresh the page, we're going to get a different set of numbers. In this case, actually, it generated a number greater than 90 on the first call to the rand function. If we do it one more time, we can see that it took took 5 tries to get a number greater than 90. So this is an example of, instead of using a counter, using a Boolean flag that you change the value of to true or false within your script or within your while loop based on a condition that occurs.